Hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are reading Letters of a Woman Homesteader by Elinore Pruitt Stewart. But first, I started a new book. I was listening to it, and it is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, and I like it. I'm an hour and a half in. I listen at 1.5 speed, but I'm an hour and a half in, and it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. Okay, so the first chapter is this woman, I forgot her name because I'm terrible with names, but she is part of this very intense book club, and it is just like led by this like dictator of a woman who chooses the books and who chooses the people who are going to discuss the books each month. And each discussion is comprised of a 20-minute presentation by the person who it's assigned to do, and then that person is supposed to lead the discussion. Well, our main character has two kids and is like just trying to hold on to sanity. So it is her book, and she hasn't read it, and she's only read like one page. And so she goes to the meeting. She tried really hard before to be like, I can't do this. But if you switch books or switch months with somebody, you have to pay a fine, which is wild. Okay, but she goes there, and it's very obvious that she didn't read the book. Very, very obvious that she didn't read the book. And so like the organizer like calls her out, and then like the meeting just like ends in it just like unravels. And she's talking after that meeting with like a couple other people who were part of the group, and they're like, "Hey, like read this book. Like we're meeting next month and it'll be so much more chill." And the book is like a true crime slasher, like romance book, like something very not like the classics, which this other group was reading. And so she goes to it, and it is comprised of like, I think, four other moms that were also part of the original Scary Book Club. And they talk about the book for 2 hours. And our main character actually read it because it was actually interesting and not super dry. And so she's been going to this book club, and she's been going for like 4 years now. And I love that so much. Like there was a couple times when I was just like smiling to myself, like as like they were, talking and like bantering and stuff. Like it was just so good. And oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh no, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Nobody knows. But yeah, I really liked it. Again, I'm not very far. I'm on chapter 4. But something is about to happen because she is going out in the dark to go and like recycle, like put her recycles out at the edge of the street, and she's like starting to hear noises. So that's where unfortunately I had to stop. So we'll see. I left it on a cliffhanger. Again, I'm not so into it, or not so far into it, but I read one other Grady Hendrix book. I read Final Girls Support Group, and I didn't like that one like at all. Like I just didn't vibe with it. But I heard a lot of good things about this one, so I picked it up. And so far, I'm glad that I did. I think at least I don't know how many pages it is, but the audio is 13-ish hours, and I'm an hour and a half in. So, and it's also just like a really good, it's a good one to do on audio because it's not like super, super heavy or like super intense in the writing where you have to like fully use every single one of your brain cells to understand what's happening. Like the way that it's written is very engaging. Okay, today though, we are reading Letters of a Woman Homesteader by Elinore Pruitt Stewart. Okay, how did I find this book? That's a great question that you've asked. Um, I was looking for books that had happy endings. Happy books in the public domain. And I came across a list that was happy surprises that are in the public domain. So, that being said, I don't know if this book is happy. I don't know if it's like a good, happy moment that we're going to have because this book is written in the form of letters by Elinore Pruitt Stewart when she's either on her way to Wyoming or when she's in Wyoming in the early 1900s. So I don't know if this is going to be like an Oregon Trail type of situation where everybody gets dysentery and dies, or if it's going to be like, yeah, and then we flew over the rainbow and that's how we got electricity. Like I don't know what's going to happen. I don't I don't know. But I'm here for it and I'm ready and I'm excited. Also, it's interesting that it is written like as letters and that medium makes me smile. So I did pull up a like little Wikipedia article about Elinore Pruitt Stewart. Um, there's not too much like about the letters themselves. Like there's no Wikipedia page for this book or for this collection of letters, which I find interesting. But I will read you about her. So Elinore Pruitt Stewart, born Elinore Pruitt, June 3rd. Oh my gosh, it was just her birthday. June 3rd, 1876, and died October 8th, 1933. Was a homesteader in Wyoming and a memoirist who between 1909 and 1914 wrote letters describing her life there to a former employer in Denver, Colorado. Those letters, which reveal an adventurous, capable, and resourceful woman of lively intelligence, were published in two collections in 1914 and 1915. The first of those collections, Letters of a Woman Homesteader, was the basis of the 1979 film Heartland. And then I also wanted to, okay, so for legacy for this, so we have the film Heartland, but then also in 1985, the Elinore Pruitt Stewart homestead, like the actual place where she and her family lived, was added to the National Register for Historic Places. So that's kind of cool. That's fun. A little fun fact for ya. So let's do it. Letters of a Woman Homesteader. The Arrival at Burnt Fork, Wyoming, April 18, 1909. Dear Mrs. Coney, are you thinking I am lost, like the babes in the wood? Well, I am not, and I'm sure the robins would have the time of their lives getting leaves to cover me out here. I'm way up close to the forest reserve of Utah, within half a mile of the line, 60 miles from the railway. I was 24 hours on the train and 2 days on the stage, and oh, those 2 days. The snow was just beginning to melt, and the mud was about the worst I ever heard. The first stage we tackled was just about as rickety as it could very well be, and I had to sit with the driver, who was a Mormon, and so handsome that I was not a bit offended when he insisted on making love all the way, especially after he told me that he was a widower Mormon. But, of course, as I had no chaperone, I looked very fierce. Not that that was very difficult with the wind and mud as allies, and told him my actual opinion of Mormons in general and particular. Meantime, my new employer, Mr. Stewart, sat upon a stack of baggage and was dreadfully concerned about something he called his tukey. But I am unable to tell you what that is. The road, being so muddy, was full of ruts, and the stage acted as if it had hiccups, and made us all talk as though we were affected in the same way. Once Mr. Stewart asked me if I did not think it a gay, Gey, Dure trip. I told him he could call it gay if he wanted to, but it didn't seem very hilarious to me. Every time the stage struck a rock or a rut, Mr. Stewart would hoot, until I began to wish we would come to a hollow tree or a hole in the ground so he could go with the rest of the owls. At last we arrive, and everything is just lovely for me. I have a very, very comfortable situation, and Mr. Stewart is absolutely no trouble, for as soon as he has his meals, he retires to his room and plays on his bagpipes. Only he calls it his bug peep. It is the Campbells are coming, without variations, at intervals all day long, and from 7 till 11 at night. Sometimes I wish they would make haste and get here. There is a saddle horse, especially for me, and a little shotgun with which I am to kill sage chickens. We are between two trout streams, so you can think of me as being happy when the snow is through melting and the water gets clear. We have the finest flock of Plymouth Rocks and get so many nice eggs. It sure seems fine to have all the cream I want after my own town experiences. Jareen is making good use of all the good things we are having. She rides the pony to water every day. I have not filed on my land yet, because the snow is 15 feet deep on it, and I think I would rather see what I am getting, so we'll wait until summer. They have just 3 seasons here, winter and July and August. We are to plant our garden the last of May. When it is so I can get around, I will see about land and find out all I can and tell you. I think this letter is about to reach 32ndly, so I will send you my sincerest love and quit tiring you. Please write me when you have time. Sincerely yours, Elinore Rupert. Okay. First letter done. She just arrived. She's talking about her travels with Mr. Stewart. She has some opinions on Mormons. Like what? And it's winter, so she is talking about like it looks really nice, but it's really cold right now. But when the snow melts, when the ice melts, there's going to be a lot of fish. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to grow things, all of these types of things. And I will tell you more when I can get out there. 2. Filing a claim. May 24, 1904. Dear Mrs. Coney, well, I have filed on my land and am now a bloated landowner. I waited a long time to even see land in the reserve, and the snow is yet too deep. So I thought that as they have but 3 months of summer and spring together, and as I wanted the land for a ranch anyway, perhaps I had better stay in the valley. So I have filed adjourning Mr. Stewart, and I am well pleased. I have a grove of 12 swamp pines on my place, and I am going to build my house there. I thought it would be very romantic to live on the peaks amid the whispering pines, but I reckon it would be powerfully uncomfortable also, and I guess my 12 can whisper enough for me. And a dandy thing is, I have all the nice snow water I want. A small stream runs right through the center of my land, and I am quite near wood. A neighbor and his daughter were going to Green River, the county seat, and said I might go along, so I did, as I could file there as well as at the land office, and oh, what a trip! I had more fun to the square inch than Mark Twain or Samantha Allen ever provoked. It took us a whole week to go and come. We camped out, of course, for in the whole 60 miles there was but one house, and going in that direction there is not a tree to be seen, nothing but sage, sand, and sheep. About noon, the first day, out we came near a sheep wagon, and stalking along ahead of us was a lanky fellow, a herder, going home for dinner. Suddenly, it seemed to me I should starve if I had to wait until we got where we had planned to stop for dinner. So I called out to the man, "Little Bo Peep, have you anything to eat? If you have, we'd like to find it." And he answered, "As soon as I am able, it shall be on the table, if you'll but trouble to get behind it." Shades of Shakespeare, songs of David, the shepherd poet. What do you think of us? Well, we got behind it, and a more delicious it I never tasted. Such coffee, and out of such a pot! I promised Bo Peep that I would send him a crook with pink ribbons on it, but I suspect he thinks I am a crook without the ribbons. The sagebrush is so short in some places that it is not large enough to make a fire, so we had to drive until quite late before we camped that night. After driving all day over what seemed a leveled desert of sand, we came about sundown to a beautiful canyon, down which we had to drive for a couple of miles before we could cross it. In the canyon, the shadows had already fallen, but when we looked up we could see the last shafts of sunlight on the tops of the great bare buttes. Suddenly, a great wolf started from somewhere and galloped along the edge of the canyon, outlined black and clear by the setting sun. His curiosity overcame him at last, so he sat down and waited to see what manner of beast we were. I reckon he was disappointed, for he howled most dismally. I thought of Jack London's The Wolf. After we quitted the canyon, I saw the most beautiful sight. It seemed as if we were driving through a golden haze. The violet shadows were creeping up between the hills, while away back of us the snow-capped peaks were catching the sun's last rays. On every side of us stretched the poor, hopeless desert, the sage, grim and determined to live in spite of starvation, and the great, bare, desolate buttes. The beautiful colors turned to amber and rose, and then to the general tone, dull gray. Then we stopped to camp, and such a scurrying around to gather brush for the fire and to get supper. Everything tasted so good. Jereen ate like a man. Then we raised the wagon tongue and spread the wagon sheet over it and made a bedroom for us women. We made our beds on the warm, soft sand and went to bed. It was too beautiful a night to sleep, so I put my head out to look and to think. I saw the moon come up and hang for a while over the mountain as if it were discouraged with the prospect, and the big white stars flirted shamelessly with the hills. I saw a coyote come trotting along, and I felt sorry for him, having to hunt food in so barren a place. But when presently I heard the whir of wings, I felt sorry for the sage chicken he had disturbed. At length, a cloud came up, and I went to sleep, and next morning was covered several inches with snow. It didn't hurt us a bit, but while I was struggling with stubborn corsets and shoes, I communed with myself, after the manner of prodigals, and said, how much better that I were down in Denver, even at Mrs. Coney's, digging with a skewer into the corners, seeking dirt which might be there. Yeah, even eating codfish, than that I should perish on this desert of imagination. So I turned the current of my imagination and fancied that I was at home before the fireplace, and that the backlog was about to roll down. My fancy was in such good working trim that before I knew it I kicked the wagon wheel, and I certainly got as warm as the most sought scientist that ever read Mrs. Eddy could possibly wish. After 2 more days, I arrived. When I went up to the office where I was to file, the door was open, and the most taciturn old man sat before a desk. I hesitated at the door, but he never let on. I coughed, yet no sign but a deeper scowl. I stepped in and modestly kicked over a chair. He whirled round like I had shot him. "Well?" he interrogated. I said, "I am powerful glad of it. I was afraid you were sick. You looked in such pain." He looked at me a minute, then grinned and said he thought I was a book agent. Fancy me, a fat, comfortable widow trying to sell books. Well, I filed and came home. If you will believe me, the Scot was glad to see me and didn't herald the Campbells for 2 hours after I got home. I'll tell you, it is mighty seldom anyone's so much appreciated. No, we have no rural delivery. It is 2 miles to the office, but I go whenever I like. It is really the jolliest kind of fun to gallop down. We are 60 miles from the railroad, but when we want anything, we send by the mail carrier for it, only there is nothing to get. I know this is an inexcusably long letter, but it is snowing so hard and you know how I like to talk. I am sure Jareen will enjoy the cards, and we will be glad to get them. Many things that are a comfort to us out here came from dear Mrs. And then there's an M dash, so it's like a fill in the blank. Baby has the rabbit you gave her last Easter, a year ago. In Denver, I was afraid my baby would grow up devoid of imagination. Like all the kindergartners, she depended upon others to amuse her. I was very sorry about it, for my castles in Spain have been real homes to me. But there is no fear. She's a block of wood she found in the blacksmith shop, which she calls her dear baby. A spoke out of a wagon wheel is little Margaret, and a barrel stave is bad little Johnny. Well, I must quit writing before you vote me a nuisance. With lots of love to you, your sincere friend, Elinore Rupert. Okay, so end of the second letter. So it's May and it is still snowing, which hate that. And she is going on a journey, which it takes about a week there and back. And so they're like camping, and she's explaining all of these things and the nature that she sees, and like the circle of life that she notices, and the people that she's come across. And she files for the land and then heads back home. It is interesting. So like the art of letter writing has changed so much. I have never in my whole life have ever received a letter or an email or any sort of message that read like it was a page from a book like this does. So that's pretty cool. It's because we're all trying to go faster. And well, like our means of communication have drastically changed. Like you don't need to spin a tale if you're like texting, or if you're just like talking on the phone or emailing or like whatever it is, messaging each other. And it's more of like a conversation now, communication now, than uh when you wrote a letter like once a month to somebody. So you like really have to like extrapolate all of the details because there might be questions, and you kind of almost anticipate the questions when you're writing, I guess. I don't know, I haven't done that before. So these are just guesses. Okay. 3. A busy, happy summer. September 11th, 1901. Dear Mrs. Coney, this has been for me the busiest, happiest summer I can remember. I've worked very hard, but it has been work that I really enjoy. Help of any kind is very hard to get here, and Mr. Stewart had been too confident of getting men, so that haying caught him with too few men to put up the hay. He had no man to run the mower, and he couldn't run both the mower and the stacker, so you can fancy what a place he was in. I don't know that I ever told you, but my parents died within a year of each other, and left 6 of us to shift for ourselves. Our people offered to take one here and there among them until we should all have a place, but we refused to be raised on the halves, and so arranged to stay at grandmother's and keep together. Well, we had no money to hire men to do our work, so had to learn to do it ourselves. Consequently, I learned to do many things which girls more fortunately situated don't even know have to be done. Among the things I learned to do was the way to run a mowing machine. It cost me many bitter tears because I got sunburned, and my hands were hard, rough, and stained with machine oil, and I used to wonder how any Prince Charming could overlook all that in any girl he came to me. For all I had ever read of the prince had to do with his reverently kissing her lily-white hand, or doing some other fool trick with a hand as white as a snowflake. Well, when my prince showed up, he didn't lose much time in letting me know that Barkis was willing, and I wrapped my hands in my old checkered apron and took him up before he could catch his breath. Then there was no more mowing, and I almost forgot that I knew how until Mr. Stewart got into such a panic. If he put a man to mow, it kept them all idle at the stacker, and he just couldn't get enough men. I was afraid to tell him I could mow for fear he would forbid me to do so. But one morning, when he was chasing a last hope of help, I went down to the barn, took out the horses, and went to mowing. I had enough cut before he got back to show him I knew how, and as he came back manless, he was delighted as well as surprised. I was glad, because I really like to mow, and besides that, I am adding feathers to my cap in a surprising way. When you see me again, you will think I am wearing a feather duster, but it is only that I have been said to have almost as much sense as a mon, and that is an honor I never aspired to, even in my wildest dreams. I have done most of my cooking at night, have milked 7 cows every day, and have done all the hay cutting, so you see I have been working. But I have found time to put up 30 pints of jelly and the same amount of jam for myself. I used wild fruits, gooseberries, currants, raspberries, and cherries. I have almost 2 gallons of the cherry butter, and I think it is delicious. I wish I could get some of it to you. I am sure you would like it. We began haying July 5 and finished September 8. After working so hard and so steadily, I decided on a day off, so yesterday I saddled the pony, took a few things I needed, and Jareen and I fared forth. Baby can ride behind quite well. We got away by sunup, and a glorious day we had. We followed a stream higher up into the mountains, and the air was so keen and clear at first we had on our coats. There was a tang of sage and of pine in the air, and our horse was mid-side deep in rabbit brush, a shrub just covered with flowers that look and smell like goldenrod. The blue distance promised many alluring adventures, so we went along singing and simply gulping in summer. Occasionally, a bunch of sage chickens would fly up out of sagebrush, or a jackrabbit would leap out. Once we saw a bunch of antelope gallop over a hill, but we were out just to be out, and game didn't tempt us. I started, though, to have just as good a time as possible, so I had a fishhook in my knapsack. Presently, about noon, we came to a little dell where the grass was as soft and as green as a lawn. The creek kept right up against the hills on one side, and there were groves of quaking asp and cottonwoods that made shade, and service bushes and birches that shut off the ugly hills on the other side. We dismounted and prepared to noon. We caught a few grasshoppers and cut a birch pole for a rod. The trout are so beautiful now. Their sides are so silvery, with dashes of old rose and orange. Their speckles are so black, while their backs look as if they have been sprinkled with gold dust. They bite so well that it doesn't require any especial skill or tackle to catch plenty for a meal in a few minutes. In a little while, I went back to where I had left my pony browsing with 8 beauties. We made a fire first, Then I dressed my trout while it was burning down to a nice bed of coals. I had brought a frying pan and a bottle of lard, salt, and buttered bread. We gathered a few service berries. Our trout were soon browned and with water, clear and cold as ice. We had a feast. The quaking aspens are beginning to turn yellow, but no leaves have fallen. Their shadows dimpled and twinkled over the grass like happy children. The sound of the dashing, roaring water kept inviting me to cast for trout, but I didn't want to carry them so far, so we rested until the sun was getting low and then started for home, with the song and the locusts in our ears warning us that the melancholy days are almost here. We would come up over the hill into the glory of a beautiful sunset with its gorgeous colors, then down into the little valley already purpling with mysterious twilight. So on, until, just at dark, we rode into our corral, and a mighty, tired, sleepy little girl was powerfully glad to get home. After I had mailed my other letter, I was afraid that he would think me plumb bold about the little Bo Peep, and was a heap sorrier than you can imagine. If you only knew the hardships these poor men endure. They go two together, and sometimes it is months before they see another soul, and rarely ever a woman. I wouldn't act so free in town, but these men see people so seldom that they are awkward and embarrassed. I like to put them at ease, and it is to be done only by being kind of hail fellow well met with them. So far, not one has ever misunderstood me, and I have been treated with every courtesy and kindness, so I am powerfully glad you understand. They really enjoy doing these little things like fixing our dinner, and if my poor company can add to anyone's pleasure, I am glad too. Sincerely yours, Elinore Pruitt. Mr. Stewart is going to put up my house for me in pay for my extra work. I'm ashamed of my long letters to you, but I am such a murderer of language that I have to use it all to tell anything. Please don't entirely forget me. Your letters mean so much to me, and I will try to answer more promptly. End of 3. So, 3, we have a huge gap in time. So, our second letter was in May. This letter is in September. And she is a little apologetic just because it has just been so long since her last letter, but she's talking about, like how busy she is, and she's like doing work that is surprising to Mr. Stewart, like mowing, and something that is not necessarily a job that is expected or even like posed to women, which is like the manual labor that is beyond, milking cows, gathering eggs, those types of things. So that's pretty cool. She seems very independent, which is awesome. Love to see that, especially in, 1909. That's pretty cool. And I also find it interesting that she herself does not think that she is a very good writer, and that she said something about like murdering the language because it has to be so verbose in order for her to explain everything that's happening. And she's also doing a really great job of making Wyoming seem beautiful, like finding the awe and just taking moments when, like the sun is setting, or when, like looking at the trout, like looking at the fish and describing how colorful they are and everything like that. Like it seems beautiful, and it's absolutely, in my head anyway, romanticizing being in Wyoming in 1909. I would not survive in Wyoming in 1909. I mean, I would if I really had to. I could if I really had to, but she's making me feel like this is nice, that this is a nice life. Which I know, I mean, it might be, but it's hard. It's hard work. But I do appreciate that it is balanced with, yeah, it's really, really hard and I'm doing all of these things, but I'm also talking with all of these people who don't really see a lot of like other folk because they live outside of the towns. And I'm, taking days off and fishing and hanging out and whatever. All right. A Charming Adventure and Zebulon Pike. September 28, 1909. Dear Mrs. Coney, your second card just reached me, and I am plumb glad because although I answered your other, I was wishing I could write you, for I have had the most charming adventure. It is the custom here for as many women as care to go in a party over into Utah to Ashland, which is over 100 miles away, after fruit. They usually go in September, and it takes a week to make the trip. They take wagons and camp out and, of course, have a good time. But the greater part of the way, there isn't even the semblance of a road, and it is merely a semblance anywhere. They came over to invite me to join them. I was of two minds. I wanted to go, but it seemed a little risky and a big chance for discomfort, since we would have to cross the Uinta Mountains, and a snowstorm likely any time. But I didn't like to refuse outright, so we left it to Mr. Stewart. His "Yerne garn" sounded powerful final, so the ladies departed in awed silence, and I assumed a martyr-like air and acted like a very much abused woman, although he did only what I wanted him to do. At last, in sheer desperation, he told me the bairn canna stand the treep, and that was why he was so determined. I knew why, of course, but I continued to look abused lest he gets it into his head that he can boss me. After he had been reduced to the proper plane of humility, and had explained and begged my pardon, and had told me to consult only my own pleasure about going and coming and using his horses, only not to expose the bairn, why, I forgave him, and we were friends once more. Next day, all the men left for the roundup, to be gone a week. I knew I never could stand myself a whole week. In a little while the ladies came past on their way to Ashland. They were all laughing, and were so happy that I really began to wish I was one of the number. But they went their way, and I kept wanting to go somewhere. I got reckless, and determined to do something real bad. So I went down to the barn and saddled Robin Adair, placed a pack on Jeemes McGregor, then Jereen and I left for a camping out expedition. It was 9 o'clock when we started, and we rode hard until about 4, when I turned Robin loose, saddle and all, for I knew he would go home, and someone would see him and put him into the pasture. We had gotten to where we couldn't ride any more, so I put Jereen on the pack and let Jeemes for about 2 hours longer. Then, as I had come to a good place to camp, we stopped. While we had at least 2 good hours of daylight, it gets so cold here in the evening that fire is very necessary. We had been climbing higher into the mountains all day and had reached a level tableland where the grass was luxuriant and there was plenty of wood and water. I unpacked Jeemes and staked him out, built a roaring fire, and made our bed in an angle of a sheer wall of rock where we would be protected against the wind. Then I put some potatoes into the ember, as Baby and I are both fond of roasted potatoes. I started a little spring to get water for my coffee when I saw a couple of jackrabbits playing, so I went back for my little shotgun. I shot one of the rabbits, so I felt very like leather stocking, because I had killed but one when I might have gotten two. It was fat and young, and it was but the work of a moment to dress it and hang it up on a tree. Then I fried some slices of bacon, made myself a cup of coffee, and Jereen and I sat on the ground and ate. Everything smelled and tasted so good. This air is so tonic that one gets delightfully hungry. Afterward, we watered and re-staked Jeems. I rolled some logs on the fire, and then we sat and enjoyed the prospect. The moon was so new that its light was very dim, but the stars were bright. Presently, a long, quivering wail arose and was answered from a dozen hills. It seemed just the sound one ought to hear in such a place. When the howls ceased for a moment, we could hear the subdued roar of the creek and the crooning of the wind in the pines. So we rather enjoyed the coyote chorus and were not afraid, because they don't attack people. Presently, we crept under our Navajos and, being tired, were soon asleep. I was awakened by a pebble striking my cheek. Something prowling on the bluff above us had dislodged it, and it struck me. By my Waterbury, it was 4 o'clock, so I rose and spitted my rabbit. The logs had left a big bed of coals, but some ends were still burning and had burned in such a manner that the heat would go both under and over my rabbit. So I put plenty of bacon grease over him and hung him up to roast. Then I went back to bed. I didn't want to start early because the air is too keen for comfort early in the morning. The sun was just gilding the hilltops when we arose. Everything, even the barrenness, was beautiful. We have had frosts, and the quaking aspens were a trembling field of gold as far up the stream as we could see. We were way up above them and could look far across the valley. We could see the silvery gold of the willows, the russet and bronze of the currants, and patches of colorful green shadowed where the pines were. The splendor was relieved by a background of sober gray-green hills, but even on them happy streaks and patches of yellow showed where rabbit brush grew. We washed our faces at the spring. The grasses that grew around the edge and dipped into the water were loaded with ice. Our rabbit was done to a turn. So I made some delicious coffee. Jereen got herself a can of water, and we breakfasted. Shortly afterwards, we started again. We didn't know where we were going, but we were on our way. The day was more toilsome than the last, but a very happy one. The meadowlarks kept singing like they were glad to see us. But we were still climbing and soon got beyond the larks and sage chickens, and up into the timber, where there are lots of grouse. We stopped to noon by a little lake where I got 2 small squirrels and a string of trout. We had some trout for dinner and salted the rest with the squirrels in an empty can for future use. I was anxious to get to grouse and keep close watch, but was never quick enough. Our progress was now slower and more difficult, because in places we could scarcely get through the forest. Fallen trees were everywhere, and we had to avoid the branches, which was powerful hard to do. Besides, it was quite dusky among the trees long before night, but it was all so grand and awe-inspiring. Occasionally, there was an opening through which we could see the snowy peaks, seemingly just beyond us, toward which we were headed. But when you get among such grandeur, you get to feel how little you are and how foolish is human endeavor, except that which reunites us with the mighty force called God. I was plumb uncomfortable, because all my own efforts have always been just to make the best of everything and to take things as they come. At last, we came to an open side of the mountain where the trees were scattered. We were facing south and east, and the mountain we were on sheered away in a dangerous slant. Beyond us, still greater wooded mountains blocked the way, and in the canyon between night had already fallen. I began to get scary. I could only think of bears and catamounts, so, as it was 5 o'clock, we decided to camp. The trees were immense. The lower branches came clear to the ground and grew so dense that any tree afforded a splendid shelter from the weather, but I was nervous and wanted one that would protect us against any possible attack. At last, We found one growing in a crevice of what seemed to be a sheer wall of rock. Nothing could reach us on two sides, and in front 2 large trees had fallen so that I could make a log heap which would give us warmth and make us safe. So with rising spirits, I unpacked and prepared for the night. I soon had a roaring fire up against the logs, and cutting away a few branches, let the heat into as snug a bedroom as anyone could wish. The pine needles made as soft a carpet as the wealthiest could afford. Springs abound in the mountains, so water was plenty. I staked James quite near so that the firelight would frighten away any wild thing that tried to harm him. Grass was very plentiful, so when he was made comfy, I made our bed and fried our trout. The branches had torn off the bag in which I had my bread, so it was lost in the forest. But who needs bread when they have good, mealy potatoes? In a short time, we were eating like Lent was just over. We lost all the glory of the sunset except what we got by reflection, being on the side of the mountain we were, with the dense woods between. Big, sullen clouds kept drifting over, and wind got lost in the trees that kept them rocking and groaning in a horrid way. But we were just as cozy as we could be, and rest was as good as anything. I wish you could once sleep on the kind of bed we enjoyed that night. It was both soft and firm, with the clean, spicy smell of the pine. The heat from our big fire came in, and we were warm as toast. It was so good to stretch out and rest. I kept thinking how superior I was, since I dared to take such an outing, when so many poor women down in Denver were bent on making their 20 cents per hour in order that they could spare a quarter to go to the show. I went to sleep with a powerfully self-satisfied feeling, but I awoke to realize that pride goeth before a fall. I could hardly remember where I was when I awoke, and I could almost hear the silence. Not a tree moaned, not a branch seemed to stir. I arose, and my head came in violent contact with a snag that was not there when I went to bed. I thought either I must have grown taller or the tree shorter during the night. As soon as I peered out, the mystery was explained. Such a snowstorm I never saw. The snow had pressed the branches down lower, hence my bumped head. Our fire was burning merrily, and the heat kept the snow from in front. I scrambled out and poked up the fire. Then, as it was only 5 o'clock, I went back to bed. And then I began to think how many kinds of idiot I was. Here I was 30 or 40 miles from home, in the mountains where no one goes in the winter, and where I knew the snow got to be 10 or 15 feet deep. But I could never see the good of moping. So I got up and got breakfast while Baby put her shoes on. We had our squirrels and more baked potatoes, and I had delicious black coffee. After I had eaten, I felt more hopeful. I knew Mr. Stewart would hunt for me if he knew I was lost. It was true. He wouldn't know which way to start, but I determined to rig up Jeeves and turn him loose, for I knew he would go home and that he would leave a trail so that I could be found. I hated to do so, for I knew I should always have to be powerfully humble afterwards. Anyway, it was still snowing, great, heavy flakes. They looked as large as dollars. I didn't want to start Jeeves until the snow stopped because I wanted him to leave a clear trail. I had 16 loads for my gun, and I reasoned that I could likely kill enough food to last twice that many days by being careful what I shot at. It just kept snowing, so at last I decided to take a little hunt and provide for the day. I left Jereen happy with the towel rolled into a baby, and went along the brow of the mountain for almost a mile, but the snow fell so thickly that I couldn't see far. Then I happened to look down into the canyon that lay east of us and saw smoke. I looked toward it a long time, but could make out nothing but smoke. but presently I heard a dog bark, and I knew I was near a camp of some kind. I resolved to join them, so went back to break my own camp. At last, everything was ready, and Jareen and I both mounted. Of all the times, if you think there is much comfort, or even security, in riding a pack horse in a snowstorm over mountains where there is no road, you are plumb wrong. Every once in a while, a tree would unload its snow down our backs. Jeems kept stumbling and threatening to break our necks. At last, we got down the mountainside, where new danger confronted us. We might lose sight of the smoke or ride into a bog, but at last, after what seemed hours, we came into a clearing with a small log house and, what is rare in Wyoming, a fireplace. 3 or 4 hounds set up their deep baying, and I knew by the chimney and the hounds that it was the home of a Southerner. A little old man came bustling out, chewing his tobacco so fast and almost frantic about his suspenders, which it seemed he couldn't get adjusted. As I rode up, he said, "Whither, friend?" And I said, "Hither." Then he asked, "Air you spying around for one of them dinged game wardens arter that deer I killed yesterday?" I told him I had never seen a game warden, and that I didn't know he had killed a deer. "Well," he said, "air you spying around arter that gold mine I discovered over the west side of Baldy?" But after a while I convinced him that I was no more nor less than a foolish woman lost in the snow. Then he said, "Light, stranger, and look at your saddle." So I lit and looked, and then I asked him what part of the South he was from. He answered, "Yell County, by gum. The best place in the United States or in the world, either." That was my introduction to Zebulon Pike Parker. Only 2 Johnny Rebs could have enjoyed each other's company as Zebulon Pike and myself did. He was so small and so old, but so cheerful and so sprightly, and a real Southerner. He had a big open fireplace with backlogs and andirons. How I enjoyed it all. How we feasted on some of the deer killed yesterday, and real corn pone baked in a skillet down on the hearth. He was so full of happy recollections and had a few that were not so happy. He is, in some way, a kinsman of Pike, of Pike's Peak fame, and he went west just arter the war on some expedition and just stayed. He told me about his home life back in Yell County, and I feel that I know all the young'uns. There was George Henry, his only brother, and there were Phoebe and Mothie, whose real name is Martha, and poor little Mary Ann, whose death was described so feelingly that no one could keep back the tears. Lastly, there was little Mandy, the baby and his favorite, but who, I am afraid, was a selfish little beast, since she had to have her prunellas when all the rest of the young'uns had to wear shoes that old Uncle Buck made out of rawhide. But then her eyes were blue as morning glories, and her hair was just like corn silk, so yaller and fluffy. Bless this simple, honest heart. His own eyes are blue and kind, and his poor, thin little shoulders are so round that they almost meet in front. How he loved to talk of his boyhood days. I can almost see his father and George Henry as they marched away to the Wa together, and the poor little mother's despair as she waited day after day for some word that never came. Poor little Marianne was drowned in the bayou, where she was trying to get water lilies. She had wanted a white dress all her life, and so, when she was dead, they took down the white crossbar curtains, and Mother made the little shroud by the light of a tallow dip. But, being made by hand, It took all the next day, too, so that they buried her by moonlight down back of the orchard under the big elm where the children had always had their swing, and they lined and covered her grave with big, fragrant water lilies. As they lowered the poor little homemade coffin into the grave, the mockingbirds began to sing, and they sang all that dewy moonlight night. Then little Mandy's wedding to Judge Carter's son Jim was described. She wore a cream-colored poplin with a red rose throwed up in it, and the lace that was on Grandma's wedding dress. There were bowers of sweet southern roses and honeysuckle and wistaria. Don't you know she was a dainty bride? At last it came out that he had not heard from home since he left it. Don't you ever write? I asked. No, I'm not an educated man, although I started to school. Yes'm, I started along of the rest, but they told me it was a Yankee teacher, and I was afraid. So when I got most to the schoolhouse, I hid in the bushes with my spelling book. So that is all the learning I ever got. But my mother was an educated woman, yes'm. She could both read and write. I have the Bible, she give me it. Yes'm, you just wait, and I'll show you. After some rummaging in a box, he came back with a small, leather-bound Bible, with print so small it was hard to read. After turning to the record of births and deaths, he handed it to me, his wrinkled old face shining with pride as he said, "There, my mother wrote that with her own hand." I took the book, and after a little deciphered that Zebulon Pike Parker was born February 10, 1830, written in the stiff, difficult style of long ago, and written with pokeberry ink. He said his mother used to read about some old feller that was just covered with biles. So I read Job to him, and he was full of surprise they didn't get some cherry bark and some sarsaparilla and bile it good and gin it to him. He had a side room to his cabin, which was his bedroom. So that night he spread down a buffalo robe and 2 bear skins before the fire for Jereen and me. After making sure there were no moths in them, I spread blankets over them and put a sleepy, happy little girl to bed, for he had insisted on making molasses candy for her because they happened to be born on the same day of the month. And then he played the fiddle until almost 1 o'clock. He played all the simple, sweet, old-time pieces in rather a squeaky, jerky way, I am afraid, but the music suited the time and the place. Next morning he called me early, and when I went out I saw such a beautiful sunrise, well worth the effort of coming to see. I had thought his cabin in a canyon, but the snow had deceived me. For a few steps from the door the mountains seemed to drop down suddenly for several 100 feet, and the first of the snow peaks seemed to lie right at our feet. Around its base is a great swamp, in which the swamp pines grow very thickly, and from which a vapor was rising that got about halfway up the snow peak all around. Fancy to yourself a big jewel box of dark green velvet, lying like an immense opal in its center, and over all the amber light of a new day. That is what it looked most like. Well, we went next to the corral, where I was surprised to find about 30 head of sheep. Some of them looked like they should have been sold 10 years before. "Don't you ever sell any of your sheep?" I asked. "No'm. There was a feller come here once and wanted to buy some of the wethers, but I wouldn't sell any because I didn't need any money." Then he went from animal to animal, caressing each and talking to them, calling them each by name. He milked his 1 cow, fed his 2 little mules, and then we went back to the house to cook breakfast. We had delicious venison steak, smoking hot, and hoe cakes and the bestest coffee and honey. After breakfast, we set out for home. Our pack transferred to one of the little mules. We rode Jeems, and Mr. Parker rode the other mule. He took us another way down canyon after canyon so that we were able to ride all the time and could make better speed. We came down out of the snow and camped within 12 miles of home in an old, deserted ranch house. We had grouse and sage chicken for supper. I was so anxious to get home that I could hardly sleep, but at last I did, and was only awakened by the odor of coffee, and barely had time to wash before Zebulon Pike called breakfast. Afterwards, we fixed James's pack so that I could still ride, for Zebulon Pike was very anxious to get back to his critters. Poor, lonely, childlike little man. He tried to tell me how glad he had been to entertain me. Why, he said, I was plumb glad to see you and right sorry to have you go. Why, I'd just as soon talk to you as somebody that they seem not as worth talking to based solely on the color of their skin. Yes, ma'am, I would. It has been almost as good as talking to old Aunt Dilsey. If a Yankee had said the same to me, I would have demanded instant apology. But I know how the Southern heart longs for the dear, kindly worldviews, so used the same word, but this time was like put in quotes. So I came on homeward, thankful for the first time that I can't talk correctly. I got home at 12 and found, to my joy, that none of the men had returned, so I am safe from their superiority for a while, at least. With many apologies for this outrageous letter, I am your ex-wash lady, Elinore Pruitt. Okay, end of the chapter. Okay, so this letter it was much longer, and Eleanor is just so excited to talk about her trip. So she talks about how the women in this community that she is now part of makes this annual trip, like 100 miles, specifically for fruit. And Mr. Stewart is like, you're not gonna go. And so she is like taken aback and is just like, how dare, I am an independent woman, you have no control over me. And he just keeps like coming up with reasons why she can't go. And so the men go on this like separate trip. So while Mr. Stewart is gone, she goes on her own trip. And so she goes camping and she is able to, support herself. She hunts game, she goes fishing, she has taken the horse with her and the baby with her, as well as Jareen. I'm not really sure if Jareen and Baby are the same kid, or if Baby just doesn't get a name until we know that Baby is going to survive. I'm not really sure. Um, so one or two children are with her, and she wakes up one of the nights and it is just super snowing, just intensely snowing. And so she packs up and she's having a hard time with the terrain because there's like no road. She's basically in the mountains and she's on this horse and just having a difficult time. And then she sees smoke. And so she goes to see the smoke, and it is this house that has a fireplace and a couple dogs. And she goes up there, and it is this southern gentleman, and they strike up a kinship, I guess. And she stays the night, and then the next day he guides her to like back to the trail, an easier and faster way to get back home. And then she does get back home, and when she's back home, the men are still out, and she's like, ah, yes, I still have my freedom for just a little bit. So it's like she never left. Nobody even knows. An own little secret adventure. All right, our fifth letter. Sedalia and Regalia. November 22, 1909. My dear friend, I was dreadfully afraid that my last letter was too much for you, and now I feel plumb guilty. I really don't know how to write you. for I have to write so much to say so little, and now that my last letter made you sick, I almost wish so many things didn't happen to me, for I always want to tell you. Many things have happened since I last wrote, and Zebulon Pike is not done for by any means, but I guess I will tell you my newest experience. I am making a wedding dress. Don't grin, it isn't mine, worse luck, but I must begin at the beginning. Just after I wrote you before, there came a terrific storm which made me appreciate indoor coziness. But as only baby and I were at home, I expected it to be very lonely. The snow was just whirling when I saw someone pass the window. I opened the door, and in came the dumpiest little woman and 2 daughters. She asked me if I was Miss Rupert. I told her that she had almost guessed it, and then she introduced herself. She said she was Miss Lane, that she had heard there was a new stranger in the country, so she had brought her twin girls, Sedalia and Regalia, to be neighborly. While they were taking off their many coats and wraps, it came out that they were from Linwood, 30 miles away. I was powerful glad I had a pot roast and some baked beans. After we had put the horses in the barn, we had dinner, and I heard the story of the girls' odd names. The mother is one of those comfy, fat little women who remain happy and bubbly with fun in spite of hard knocks. I had already fallen in love with Regalia. She's so jolly and unaffected, so fat and so plain. Sedalia has a veneer of most uncomfortable refinement. She was shocked because Gale ate all the roast she wanted, and if I had been very sensitive, I would have been in tears because I ate a helping more than Gale did. About the names. It seemed that Miss Lane married quite young, was an orphan, and had no one to tell her things she should have known. She lived in Missouri, but about a year after her marriage, the young couple started overland for the West. It was in November, and one night when they had reached the plains, a real blue blizzard struck them. Miss Lane had been in pain all day, and soon she knew what was the matter. They were alone, and it was a day's travel back to the last house. The team had given out, and the wind and sleet were seeing which could do the most meanness. At last, the poor man got a fire started and a wagon sheet stretched in such a manner that it kept off the sleet. He fixed a bed under the poor shelter and did all he could to keep the fire from blowing away, and there, a few hours later, a girl baby was born. They melted sleet in the frying pan to get water to wash it. Miss Lane kept feeling no better fast, and about the time they got the poor baby dressed, a second little one came. That she told me herself is proof she didn't die, I guess, but it is right hard to believe she didn't. Luckily, the fire lasted until the babies were dressed and the mother began to feel better, for there was no wood. Soon the wind stopped and the snow fell steadily. It was warmer, and the whole family snuggled up under the wagon sheet and slept. Mr. Lane is a powerful good husband. He waited 2 whole days for his wife to gain strength before he resumed the journey, and on the 3rd morning he actually carried her to the wagon. Just think of it. Could more be asked of any man? Every turn of the wheels made poor Miss Lane more homesick. Like Mrs. Wiggs of the Cabbage Patch, she had a taste for geographical names, and Miss Lane is very loyal, so she wanted to call the firstborn Missouri. Mr. Lane said she might, but that if she did, he would call the other Arkansas. Sometimes homesickness would almost master her. She would hug up the little red baby and murmur, Missouri, and then Daddy would growl playfully to Arkansas. It went on that way for a long time, and at last she remembered that Sedalia was in Missouri, so she felt glad and really named the older baby Sedalia. But she could think of nothing to match the name, and was in constant fear the father would name the other baby Little Rock. For 3 years, poor Gale was just t'other one. Then the Lanes went to Green River, where some lodge was having a parade. They were watching the drill when a bystander that was standing by said something about the fine regalia. Instantly, Miss Lane thought of her unnamed child, so since that time, Gale has had a name. There could be no two people more unlike than the sisters. Sedalia is really handsome and she is thin, but she is vain, selfish, shallow, and conceited. Gale is not even pretty, but she is clean and she is honest. She does many little things that are not exactly polite, but she is good and true. They both went to the barn with me to milk. Gale tucked up her skirts and helped me. She said, "I just love a stable with its hay and comfortable, contented cattle. I never go into one without thinking of the little baby Christ. I almost expect to see a little baby in the straw every time I peek into a manger." Sedalia answered, "Well, for heaven's sake, get out of the stable to preach. Who wants to stand among those smelly cows all day?" They stayed with us almost a week, and one day when Gale and I were milking, she asked me to invite her to stay with me a month. She said to ask her mother, and left her mother and myself much together. But Sedalia stuck to her mother like a plaster, and I just could not stand Sedalia a whole month. However, I was spared all embarrassment, for Miss Lane asked me if I could not find work enough to keep Gale busy for a month or two. She went on to explain that Sedalia was expecting to be married, and that Gale was so common she would really spoil the match. I was surprised and indignant, especially as Sedalia sat and listened so brazenly. So I said I thought Sedalia would need all the help she could get to get married, and that I should be glad to have Gale visit me as long as she liked. So Gale stayed on with me. One afternoon she had gone to the post office when I saw Mr. Patterson ride up. He went into the bunkhouse to wait until the men should come. Now, from something Gale had said, I fancied that Bob Patterson must be the right man. I'm afraid I am not very delicate about that kind of meddling, and while I had been given to understand that Patterson was the man Sedalia expected to marry, I don't think any man would choose her if he could get Gale, so I called him. We had a long chat, and he told me frankly he wanted Gale, but that she didn't care for him, and that they kept throwing that danged Sedalia at him. Then he begged my pardon for saying danged, but I told him I approved of the word when applied to Sedalia, and broke the news to him that Gale was staying with me. He fairly beamed. So that night I left Gale to wash dishes and Bob to help her while I held Mr. Stewart a prisoner in the stable and questioned him regarding Patterson's prospects and habits. I found both all that need be and told Mr. Stewart about my talk with Patterson, and he said, "Woman, some day you'll gang plume daft." But he admitted he was glad it was the boony lassie instead of the bony one. When we went to the house, Mr. Stewart said, "Weel, when are you douchey bairns gangin' to kirk?" They left me to it, so I set Thanksgiving Day, and as there is no kirk to gang to, we are going to have a justice of the peace, and they are to be married here. We are going to have the dandiest dinner that I can cook, and Mr. Stewart went to town next day for the wedding dress, the gayest plaid outside of Caledonia. But Gale has lots of sense and is going to wear it. I have it almost finished, and while it doesn't look just like a Worth model, still it looks plumb good for me to have made. The boys are going up after Zebulon Pike, and Mr. Stewart is going after Miss Lane. Joy waves are radiating from this ranch, and about Thanksgiving morning, one will strike you. With lots of love and happy wishes, your ex-wash lady, Elinore Pruitt. End of the chapter. Okay, so this one, she is. Okay, first of all, they get a visit from Miss Lane and Miss Lane's two daughters. They live 30 miles away, and they're like, oh, we heard that there was somebody new in the country. And then they stay there for more than a week. Don't do that. Just bring a jello mold, or better yet, don't visit at all. That's too much. That's too much company. I don't understand. So, anyway, they're staying there. And the two daughters are twins, and they are named Sedalia and Regalia. And Regalia, however you pronounce it. And we get the story of how they were named. And Sedalia is a city in Missouri, and Regalia was unnamed for a while. And then they were at like a parade, I think they said, and somebody in the crowd was like, "That's a really nice Regalia." They were like, "That's the name. That's the name of our babe." And so that's how they got the names. And the meaner of the two daughters is supposed to be wed, and so they want to prepare for the wedding. And so they leave, and Gail stays with Elinore. And as they're staying, they get a visit from Peterson, and Peterson actually enjoys Gail, but for some reason they keep pushing him over to Sedalia, and he's like, I don't really want anything to do with her. And he's like, pardon me for saying danged. And Eleanor is like, you are forgiven because it is well deserved when talking about Sedalia. And so they are Miss Eleanor is inserting herself into this situation and basically makes it so that Peterson is going to marry Gail rather than Sedalia. And it's more of like a do now and ask for forgiveness later rather than like reaching out to the mother first and being like, so actually, I have found out information. She's like, no, we're going to do this wedding, and I will do everything I possibly can. I will make the nicest of meals, and I will sew the prettiest of dresses. And that was the chapter. But never come visit me for a week. Please. Please don't. Please no. All right. Letter 6. A Thanksgiving Day Wedding. Dear Mrs. Coney, I think everyone enjoyed our Thanksgiving program except poor Gail. She was grieved, I verily believe, because Mr. Patterson is not Mormon, and could not take Sedalia and herself also. I suppose it seemed odd to her to be unable to give way to Sedalia, as she had always done. I had cooked and cooked. Gail and Zebulon Pike both helped all they could. The wedding was to be at 12 o'clock, so at 10 I hustled Gail into my room to dress. I had to lock the door to keep her in, and I divided my time between the last touches of my dinner and the finishing touches to Gail's toilet and receiving the people. The Lane party had not come yet, and I was scared to death lest Sedalia had had a tantrum and that Mr. Stewart would not get back in time. At last I left the people to take care of themselves, for I had too much on my mind to bother with them. Just after 11, Mr. Stewart, Miss Lane, Sedalia, and Pa Lane arrive, and came at once into the kitchen to warm. In a little while poor, frightened Gail came creeping in, looking guilty, but she looked lovely, too, in spite of her plaid dress. She wore her hair in a coronet braid, which added dignity and height, as well as being simple and becoming. Her mother brought her a wreath for her hair, of lilies of the valley and tiny pink rosebuds. It might seem a little out of place to one who didn't see it, but the effect was really charming. Sedalia didn't know that Mr. Stewart had given Gale her dress, so, just to be nasty, she said as soon as she saw Gale, "Dear me, when are you going to dress, Gale? You will hardly have time to get out of that horse blanket you are wearing and get into something decent." You see, the thought it she thought it was one of my dresses fixed over for Gale. Presently, Sedalia asked me if I was invited to the function. She had some kind of rash on her face, and Zebulon Pike noticed the rash and heard the word function, so he thought that was the name of some disease and asked Mr. Stewart if the function was catching. Mr. Stewart had heard Sedalia, but knew Zebby had not heard all that was said, and how he got the idea he had, so he answered, "Yes, if ye once get the fever." So, Zebulon Pike privately warned everyone against getting the function from Sedalia. There are plenty of people here who don't know exactly what a function is, myself among them. So people edged away from Sedalia, and some asked her if she had seen the doctor and what he thought of her case. Poor girl. I'm afraid she didn't have a very enjoyable time. At last, the justice of the peace came, and I hope they live happily ever afterward. That night, a dance was given to celebrate the event, and we began to have dinner immediately after the wedding, so as to get through in time to start. For dances are never given in the home here, but in the hall. Every settlement has one, and the invitations are merely written announcements posted everywhere. We have what Sedalia calls homogeneous crowds. I wouldn't attempt to say what she means, but as everybody goes, no doubt she is right. Our dinner was a success, but that is not to be wondered at. Every woman for miles around contributed. Of course, we had to borrow dishes, but we couldn't think of seating everyone. So we set one table for 24 and had 3 other long tables, on one of which we placed all the meats, pickles, and sausage. On sauces, not sausage, sauces. On another, the vegetables, soup, and coffee. And on the third, the pie, cakes, ice cream, and other desserts. We had 2 big, long shelves, one above the other, on which were the dishes. The people helped themselves to dishes, and neighbors took turns at serving from the tables, so people got what they wanted and hunted themselves a place to sit while they ate. 2 of the cowboys from this ranch waited upon the table at which were the wedding party and some of their friends. Boys from other ranches helped serve and carried coffee, cake, and ice cream. The tablecloths were tolerably good linen, and we had ironed them wet so they looked nice. We had white lace paper on the shelves, and we used drawn work paper napkins. As I said, we borrowed dishes, or, that is, every woman who called herself our neighbor brought whatever she thought we would need. So after everyone had eaten, I suggested that they sort out their dishes and wash them, and in that way I was saved all that work. We had everything done, and were off to the dance by 5 o'clock. We went in sleds and sleighs. The snow was so deep, but it was all so jolly. Zebby, Mr. Stewart, Jereen, and I went in the bobsled. We jogged along at a comfortable pace lest the beasties should suffer, and every now and then a merry party would fly past us, scattering snow in our faces and yelling like Comanches. We had a lovely moon then, and the snow was so wonderful. We were driving northward and to the south, and back of us were the great somber, pine-clad Uinta Mountains, while ahead and on every side were the bare buttes, looking like old men of the mountains, so old they had lost all their hair, beard, and teeth. Gross. I don't want to lose my teeth. End of the chapter. Okay, so or end of the letter, I guess, rather. Okay, so this past letter was talking all about the wedding, the day of the wedding. And Sedalia, this little sassy business, was being kind of mean and just like looking down because she's not the one getting married. So of course she is just being upset and just taking it out on her sister who is the one getting married. And so she like makes a negative comment on the dress, not knowing, you know, where it came from and everything like that. And also as she's talking, Zebby, which love that nickname for him, Zebby overheard, and there was a rash on Sedalia's face, and so he thought that she was referring, when she was asking about the function instead of the wedding, was referring to some sort of disease called the function, being the rash on her face. And so he was a little worried about that, and so like asked Mr. Stewart about it, and everything just snowballed into kind of a funny event in that Zebby from then on starts warning people about the function and to try and stay away from Sedalia because it might be contagious. Like, we don't really know. And so people are like a little leery about it. And some people have even asked her, like, oh, are you okay? Like, have you seen the doctor for the function? Like, that sort of thing. And I just think that that is so funny and just like almost perfect, like instant karma. Like, oh, you're mean to your sister because you are not the one getting married. Now everybody thinks that you have this insane disease called the function, and they're all just staying away from you. And the end of the letter just describes this beautiful, like, Wyoming, I guess, winter. We're always in winter, just like Elinore said earlier that there's only 3 seasons. There's winter, July, and August. And we're not in July or August, so it's winter. And that they are like on this sled just having a great time. And saying that the snow is beautiful, which, sure, sure. We'll take the positive note for that. Leave left to interpretation what your own views of snow are. But I guess if you're not like shoveling it or you don't have to go anywhere, that it could be very beautiful. All right. Number 7. Zebulon Pike visits his old home. December 28, 1909. Dear Mrs. Coney, our Thanksgiving affair was the most enjoyable happening I can remember for a long time. Zebulon Pike came, but I had as a bait for him 2 fat letters from home. As soon as I came back from his place, I wrote to Mrs. Carter and trusted to luck for my letter to reach her. I told her all I could about her brother and how seldom he left his mountain home. I asked her to write him all she could in one letter, as the trips between our place and his were so few and far between. So when she received my letter, she wrote all she could think of, and then sent her letter and mine to Moffy and Phoebe, who are widows living in the old home. They each took turns writing, so their letters are a complete record of the years Zebby has been gone. The letters were addressed to me along with a cordial letter from Mrs. Carter asking me to see that he got them and to use my judgment in the delivering. I couldn't go myself, but I wanted to read the letters to him and to write the answers. So I selected one piece of news I felt would bring him to hear the rest without his knowing how much there was for him. Well, the boys brought him, and a more delighted little man, I am sure, never lived. I read the letters over and over, and answers were hurried off. He was dreadfully homesick, but couldn't figure on how he could leave the critters, or how he could trust himself on a train. Mr. Stewart became interested, and he is a very resourceful man. So an old Frenchman was found who had no home and wanted a place to stay so he could trap. He was installed at Zebulon Pike's with full instructions as to each critter's peculiarities, and needs. Then one of the boys, who was going home for Christmas to Memphis, was induced to wait for Mr. Parker and to see him safe to Little Rock. His money was banked for him, and Mr. Stewart saw that he was properly clothed and made comfortable for the trip. Then he sent a telegram to Judge Carter, who met Zebulon Pike at Little Rock, and they had a family reunion at Yell County. I have had some charming letters from there, but that only proves what I have always said, that I am the luckiest woman in finding really lovely people and having really happy experiences. Good things are constantly happening to me. I wish I could tell you about my happy Christmas, but one of my New Year's resolutions was to stop loading you down with 2,000-word letters. From something you have wrote, I think I must have written boastingly to you at some time. I've certainly not intended to, and you must please forgive me, and remember how ignorant I am and how hard it is for me to express myself properly. I felt after I had written to Mr. Parker's people that I had taken a liberty, but luckily it was not thought of in that way by them. If you only knew how far short I fall of my own hopes, you would know that I could never boast. Why, it keeps me busy making over mistakes, just like someone using old clothes. I get myself all ready to enjoy a success and find that I have to fit a failure. But one consolation is that I generally have plenty of material to cut generously, and many of my failures have proved to be real blessings. I do hope this new year may bring to you the desire of your heart and all that those who love you best most wish for you. With lots and lots of love from Baby and myself, your ex-wash lady, Elinore Pruitt. All right, this letter, much shorter, much shorter, and also interesting. There is like a self-awareness in this one that was hinted at before by just saying like, oh yeah, like my letters are so long, I'm so sorry. But then also the second guessing that she had and that moment of yeah, like I have a lot of failures, and I'm coming to realize that not all of my failures are terrible things that have happened but have turned out for the better, which is interesting. But in this one, she has written to Zebulon's family back home because he hasn't talked to them at all since he left. And she wrote back home and just hoped that the letter would reach them, and it did. And his family wrote back very excited to hear from Elinore, and Zebulon was very excited and eagerly wanted to respond immediately. But at the same time, like just so homesick and like wanting to visit, but not wanting to leave because of all of his animals that he has at home. And wouldn't luck have it that somebody was looking for a place to stay. So that person is going to stay at Zebulon's place while he takes the train to visit home, which is nice. I like that. Also, that was I'm glad that Eleanor did like have that moment of second guessing, because it was extremely presumptuous. At least like from the letters, it's not, I guess it's clear that they do have like a good relationship, but I don't know if I personally would ever have written to somebody's family who I don't know, and who I don't necessarily know how things were left. Like, yeah, Zeb had like talked about his family before and like his life before he left, but you don't know the whole story. And so that was like a little like when I like read that, I was like, oh, no, you didn't. Don't you dare. But Eleanor seems to be very good at wiggling into, this is going to sound meaner than what I mean it to be, but wiggling into like other people's lives and affairs and assisting them, whether they are asked for that assistance or not. But so far, at least between the wedding and with Zeb, it's been positive. So that's good. But yeah, I don't think I would ever or could ever just write to somebody's family that I don't know and don't know where they are and just hope that the letter gets them on behalf of this person that I met a year ago. Not even a full year. No, it hasn't even been a full year. That's wild to me. Wild. I mean, I'm glad that it worked out for the better. Different world. Definitely a different world from now. So, yeah, some of the concepts and ideas and decisions that Elinore is making is just so wildly different and strange because we just have very different lives and very different environments. Fascinating. So fascinating. All right. 8. A Happy Christmas. Dear Mrs. Coney, my happy Christmas resulted from the ex-sheriff of this county being snowbound here. It seems that persons who come from a lower altitude to this country frequently become bewildered, especially if in poor health, leave the train at any stop and wander off into the hills, sometimes dying before they are found. The ex-sheriff cited a case, that of a young German who was returning from the Philippines, where he had been discharged after the war. He was the only child of his widowed mother, who has a ranch a few miles from here. No one knew he was coming home. One day, the cook belonging to the camp of a construction gang went hunting and came back running, wild with horror. He had found the body of a man. The coroner and the sheriff were notified, and next morning went out for the body, but the wolves had almost destroyed it. High up in a willow, under which the poor man had lain down to die, they saw a small bundle tied in a red bandana and fast to a branch. They found a letter addressed to whoever should find it, saying that the body was that of Benny Louderer, and giving them directions how to spare his poor old mother the awful knowledge of how she died. Although there was a letter to his mother asking her not to grieve for him and to keep their days faithfully, their days, I afterward learned, were anniversaries which they had always kept, to which was added Benny's day. Poor boy. When he realized that death was near, his every thought was for the mother. Well, they followed his wishes, and the casket containing the bare, gnawed bones was sealed and never opened. And to this day, poor Mrs. Louderer thinks her boy died of some fever while yet aboard the transport. The manner of his death has been kept so secret that I am the only one who has heard it. I was so sorry for the poor mother that I resolved to visit her the first opportunity I had. I am at liberty to go where I please when there is no one to cook for. So, when the men left, a few days later, I took Jereen and rode over to the Louderer ranch. I had never seen Mrs. Louderer, and it happened to be Benny's day that I blundered in upon. I found her to be a dear old German woman living all alone, the people who do the work on the ranch living in another house 2 miles away. She had been weeping for hours when I got there, but in accordance with her custom on the many anniversaries, she had a real feast prepared, although no one had been bidden. She says that God always sends her guests, but that was the first time she had had a little girl. She had a little daughter once herself, little Gretchen, but all that was left was a sweet memory and a pitifully small mound on the ranch quite near the house, where Benny and Gretchen are to rest bedside. Der Vater, Herr Louderer. She is such a dear old lady. She made us so welcome, and she is so entertaining. All the remainder of the day, we listened to stories of her children, looked at her pictures, and Jereen had a lovely time with a wonderful wooden doll that they had brought with them from Germany. Mrs. Louderer forgot to weep in recalling her childhood days and showing us her treasures. Then our feast, for it was verily a feast. We had goose, and it was so delicious. I couldn't tell you half the good things any more than I could have eaten some of all of them. We sat talking until far into the night, and she asked me how I was going to spend Christmas. I told her, probably in being homesick. She said that would never do, and suggested that we spend it together. She said it was one of their special days, and that the only happiness left her was in making someone else happy. So she had thought of cooking some nice things and going to as many sheep camps as she could, taking with her the good things to the poor exiles, the sheep herders. I liked the plan and was glad to agree, but I never dreamed I should have so lovely a time. When the odd old wooden clock announced 2, we went to bed. I left quite early the next morning, with my head full of Christmas plans. You may not know, but cattlemen and sheepmen cordially hate each other. Mr. Stewart is a cattleman, and so I didn't mention my Christmas plans to him. I saved all the butter I could spare for the sheep herders. They never have any. That and some jars of gooseberry jelly was all I could give them. I cooked plenty for the people here, and 2 days before Christmas I had a chance to go down to Mrs. Louderer's in a buggy. So we went. We found her up to her ears in cooking, and such sights and smells I could never describe. She was so glad I came early, for she needed help. I never worked so hard in my life or had a pleasanter time. Mrs. Louderer had sent a man out several days before to find out how many camps there were and where they were located. There were 12 camps, and that means 24 men. We roasted 6 geese, boiled 3 small hams, and 3 hens. We had, besides several meat loaves and links of sausage, we had 12 large loaves of the best rye bread, a small tub of donuts, 12 coffee cakes, more to be called fruit cakes, and also a quantity of little cakes with seeds, nuts, and fruits in them. So pretty to look at, and so good to taste. These had a thick coat of icing, some brown, some pink, some white. I had 13 pounds of butter and 6 pint jars of jelly, so we melted the jelly and poured it into 12 glasses. The plan was to start real early Christmas Eve morning, make our circuit of camps, and wind up the day at Frau O'Shaughnessy's to spend the night. Yes, Mrs. O'Shaughnessy is Irish as the pigs in Dublin. Before it was day, the man came to feed and get our horses ready. We were up betimes and had breakfast. The last speck was wiped from the shining stove, the kitchen floor was scrubbed, and the last small thing put in order. The man had 4 horses harnessed and hitched to the sled, on which was placed a wagon box filled with straw, hot rocks, and blankets. Our 12 apostles, that is what we called our 12 boxes, were lifted in and tied firmly into place. Then we clambered in, and away we went. Mrs. Louderer drove, and Tam O'Shanter and Paul Revere were snails compared to us. We didn't follow any road either, but went sweeping along across country. No one else in the world could have done it unless they were drunk. We were careening along hillsides without even slacking the trot. Occasionally, we struck a particularly stubborn bunch of sagebrush, and even the sled runners would jump up into the air. We didn't stop to light, but hit the earth several feet in advance of where we left it. Luck was with us, though. I hardly expected to get through with my head unbroken, but not even a glass was cracked. It would have done your heart good to see the sheepmen. They were all delighted, and when you consider that they lived solely on canned corn and tomatoes, beans, salt pork, and coffee, you can fancy what they thought of their treat. They have mutton when it is fit to eat, but that is certainly not in winter. One man at each camp does the cooking and the other herds. It doesn't make any difference if the cook never cooked before, and most of them never did. At one camp, where we stopped for dinner, they had a most interesting collection of fossils. After delivering our last apostle, we turned our faces toward Frau O'Shaughnessy's and got there just in time for supper. Mrs. O'Shaughnessy is a widow, too, and has quite an interesting story. She is a dumpy little woman whose small nose seems to be smelling the stars. It is so tip-tilted. She has the merriest blue eyes and the quickest wit. It is really worth a severe bumping just to be welcomed by her. It was so warm and cozy in her low little cabin. She had her table set for supper, but she laid plates for us and put before us a beautifully roasted chicken. Thrifty Mrs. Louderer thought it should have been saved until next day, so she said to Frau O'Shaughnessy, "We hate to eat your hen. Best you save her till tomorrow." But Mrs. O'Shaughnessy answered, "Oh, 'tis no matter. 'Tis an owd hin she was anyway." So we enjoyed the owd hin, which was brown, juicy, and tender. When we had finished supper and were drinking our tea, Mrs. O'Shaughnessy told our fortunes with the tea leaves. She told mine first and said I would die an old maid. I said it was rather late for that, but she cheerfully replied, "Oh well, better late than niver." She predicted for Mrs. Louderer that she should shortly catch a beau. "'Tis the next man you will see that will come courting you." Before we left the table, someone knocked, and a young man, a sheep herder, entered. He belonged to a camp a few miles away and is out from Boston in search of health. He had been into town, and his horse was lamed, so he could not make it into camp, and he wanted to stay overnight. He was a stranger to us all, but Mrs. O'Shaughnessy made him at home and fixed such a tempting supper for him that I am sure he was glad of the chance to stay. He was very decidedly English, and powerfully proud of it. He asked Mrs. Shaughnessy if she was Irish, and she said, "No, ye heathen. It's Chinese I am. Can't yez tell from me Cockney accents?" Mrs. Boutwell looked very much surprised. I don't know which was the funnier, the way he looked or what she said. We had a late breakfast Christmas morning, but before we were through, Mrs. Stewart came. We had planned to spend the day with Mrs. O'Shaughnessy, and he didn't approve of our going into the sheep district, so when he found where we had gone, he came after us. Mrs. Louderer and he are old acquaintances, and he bosses her around like he tries to boss me. Before we left, Mrs. O'Shaughnessy's married daughter came, so we knew she would not be lonely. It was almost 1 o'clock when we got home, but all hands helped, and I had plenty cooked anyway. So we soon had a good dinner on the table. Mr. Stewart had prepared a Christmas box for Jereen and me. He doesn't approve of white waists in the winter. I had worn one at the wedding, and he felt personally aggrieved. For me, in the box were 2 dresses, that is, the material to make them. One is a brown and red checked, and the other green with a white fleck in it, both outing flannel. For Jereen, there was a pair of shoes and stockings, both stockings full of candy and nuts. He is a very bluff in manner, but he is really the kindest person. Mrs. Louderer stayed until New Year's Day. My Christmas was really a very happy one. Your friend, Elinore Rupert. An interesting day on this ranch is the day the cattle are named. If Mr. Stewart had children, he would as soon think of leaving them unnamed as to let a beastie go without a name. On the day they vaccinated, he came into the kitchen and told me he would need me to help him name the critters. So he and I assembled in a safe place and took turns naming the calves. As fast as a calf was vaccinated, it was run out of the chute, and he or I called out a name for it, and it was booked that way. The first two he named were the Duke of Monmouth and the Duke of Montrose. I called my first Oliver Cromwell and John Fox. The poor Mon had to have revenge, so the next ugly, scrawny little beast he called the Poop of Room, and it was a heifer calf, too. This morning I had the startling news that the poop had eaten too much alfalfa and was all swellet oop. And moreover, he had stealet it. I don't know which is more astonishing, that the Pope had stolen alfalfa or that he had eaten it. We have a swell lot of names, but I am not sure I could tell you which is Bloody Mary or which is Elizabeth, or indeed which is which of any of them. Signed, E.R. Okay, so this chapter, we got our Christmas Eve. So Elizabeth, or not Elizabeth, Eleanor finds out that this son has died by being like, I don't know, died, but then the wolves got to him and like ripped him up, and was like, oh, this poor mother, I'm gonna find her. Finds her, she's a little German lady, and stays there for a little bit. The German lady just welcomes her in with open arms, her and the child, and is like, oh, what are you doing for Christmas? And she's like, oh, I'm just gonna stay home, not really do anything. And the German mother, forgot her name, Mama German, is like, okay, well, you need to come with me because we need to make people happy because that's my favorite thing to do. So Eleanor is like, all right, cool. So she goes home and then pretty much immediately like starts making things, like making jams, making breads, like all of these things, and heads out again to our German mama. And then they pack up these little boxes. They pack up 12 of them. And on Christmas Eve, they go to different sheep herders and give them this like feast. And they are so, so happy about it. And then they go to an Irish woman's home and spend the night there. And they have a really delicious hen for dinner. And in the morning when they wake up, they have these presents and gifts. And it's just real cute. And then we get this little, like, it's probably just like a piece of paper that had been like destroyed at some part, because it doesn't start a new letter, it just starts like after this current letter, and there's like an ellipses, so like a dot 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 before it begins, and then it just starts talking about naming the different cows with Zebulon. And that's just like a cute little slice of life thing. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that cows cannot eat alfalfa, and that the cow didn't just swell but definitely died. That's what I'm thinking is what happened. So so cute little cow. That silly little cow ate some alfalfa. Oopsie, now it's very swollen. But a good Christmas. But a happy Christmas. All right, 9. A confession. April 5, 1910. Okay, so it's been almost a full year. Dear Mrs. Coney, I find upon rereading your letter that I did not answer it at all when I wrote you. You must think me very indifferent, but I really don't mean to. I really don't mean to be. My house joins on to Mr. Stewart's house. It was built that way so that I could hold down my land and job at the same time. I see the wisdom of it now, though at first I did not want it that way. My boundary lines run within 2 feet of Mr. Stewart's house, so it was quite easy to build on. I think Mr. Patterson's ranch is about 25 miles from us. I am glad to tell you they are doing splendidly. Gail is just as thrifty as she can be, and Bobby is steady and making fast money. Their baby is the dearest little thing. I have heard that Sedalia is to marry a Mormon bishop, but I doubt it. She puts on very disgusting airs about our Bobby, and she patronizes Gail most shamefully, but Gail, bless her unconscious heart, is so happy in her husband and son that she doesn't know Sedalia is insulting. My dear old grandmother, whom I loved so much, has gone home to God. I used to write long letters to her. I should like a few addresses of old persons who are lonely as she was, who would like letters such as I write. You know I can't be brief. I have tried, and cannot. If you know of any persons who would not tire of my long accounts, and who would care to have them, you will be doing me a favor to let me know. I have not treated you quite frankly about something you had a right to know about. I am ashamed, and I regret very much that I have not told you. I so dread the possibility of losing your friendship that I will never tell you unless you promise me beforehand to forgive me. I know that is unfair, but it is the only way I can see out of a difficulty that my foolish reticence has led me into. Few people, perhaps, consider me reticent, but in some cases I am afraid I am even deceitful. Won't you make it easy to fess, so I may be happy again? Truly your friend, Elinore Rupert. June 16, 1910. My dear friend, your card just to hand. I wrote you some time ago telling you I had a confession to make, and have had no letter since, so thought perhaps you were scared I had done something too bad to forgive. I am suffering just now from eye strain and can't see to write long at a time, but I reckon I had better confess and get it done with. The thing I have done is to marry Mr. Stewart. It was such an inconsistent thing to do that I was ashamed to tell you, and, too, I was afraid you would think I didn't need your friendship and might desert me. Another of my friends thinks that way. I hope my eyes will be better soon, and then I will write you a long letter. Your old friend with a new name, Elinore Stewart. Okay, end of 9. So we have companion letters, both very short. The first one saying, "Hey, I know it's been a while. I have something to confess to you, but you must promise to keep being my friend before I tell you what it is." And then there's no answer for months. And then Eleanor is like, "Hey, so you haven't responded to me." And I think maybe it's because I scared you and you think that I have done something super, super terrible. Remember Mr. Stewart? I married him. We're married, but I don't want you to think that we can no longer be friends, and I don't need you or my friendship with you. That's how somebody else thinks, and I don't want to lose your friendship. So, your friend with a new name, Elinore Stewart. Love the way that she signed that. That was brilliant. Brilliant. One more chapter. 10. The Story of Cora Belle. August 15, 1910. Dear Mrs. Coney, Grandma Edmondson's birthday is the 30th of May, and Mrs. O'Shaughnessy's suggested that we give her a party. I had never seen Grandma, but because of something that happened in her family years ago, which a few narrow heads whom it didn't concern in the least cannot forgive or forget, I had heard much of her. The family consists of Grandma, Grandpa, and little Cora Belle, who is the sweetest little bud that ever bloomed upon the twigs of folly. The Edmondsons had only one child, a daughter, who was to have married a man whom her parents objected to solely because he was a man, because he was a sheep man, while their sympathies were with the cattlemen, although they owned only a small bunch. To gain their consent, the young man closed out his interest in sheep at a loss, filed on a splendid piece of land near them, and built a little home for the girl he loved. Before they could get to town to be married, Grandpa was stricken with rheumatism. Grandma was already almost past going on with it, so they postponed the marriage, and as that winter was particularly severe, the young man took charge of the Edmondson stock and kept them from starving. As soon as he was able, he went for the license. Mrs. O'Shanassy and a neighbor were hunting some cattle that had wandered away and found the poor fellow shot in the back. He was not yet dead, and told them it was urgently necessary for them to hurry him to the Edmondsons and to get someone to perform the marriage ceremony as quickly as possible, for he could not live long. They told him such haste meant quicker death, because he would bleed more, but he insisted. So they got a wagon and hurried all they could. But they could not outrun death. When he knew he could not live When he could not live to reach home, he asked them to witness all he said. Everything he possessed he left to the girl he was to have married, and said he was the father of the little child that was to come. He begged them to befriend the poor girl he had to leave in such a condition, and to take the marriage license as evidence that he had tried to do right. The wagon was stopped so the jolting would not make death any harder, and there in the shadow of the great Twin Buttes he died. They took the body to the little home he had made, and Mrs. O'Shanassy went to the Edmondsons to do what she could there. Poor Cora Jane didn't know how terrible a thing wounded pride is. She told her parents her misdeeds. They couldn't see that they were in any way to blame. They seemed to care nothing for her terrible sorrow, nor for her weakened condition. All they could think of was that the child they had almost worshipped had disgraced them. So they told her to go. Mrs. O'Shanassy took her to the home that had been prepared for her, where the poor body lay. Some way they got through those dark days, and then began the waiting for the little one to come. Poor Cora Jane said she would die then, and that she wanted to die, but she wanted the baby to know it was loved. She wanted to leave something that should speak of that love when the child should come to understanding. So Mrs. O'Shaughnessy said they would make all its little clothes with every care, and they should tell of the love. Mrs. O'Shaughnessy is the daintiest needleworker I have ever seen. She was taught by the nuns at St. Catherine's in the Old Country. She was all patience with poor, unskilled Cora Jane, and the little outfit that was finally finished was dainty enough for a fairy. Little Cora Belle is so proud of it. At last the time came, and Mrs. O'Shaughnessy went after the parents, long before they had repented, and were only too glad to go. The poor mother lived one day and night after the baby came. She laid the tiny thing in her mother's arms and told them to call her Cora Belle. She told them she gave them a pure little daughter in place of the sinful one they had lost. That was almost 12 years ago, and the Edmondsons have lived in the new house all this time. The deed to the place was made out to Cora Belle, and her grandfather is her guardian. If you traveled due north from my home, after about 9 hours' ride, you would come into an open space in the butte lands, and away between two buttes you would see the glimmer of blue water. As you drew nearer, you would be able to see the fringes of willows around the lake, and presently a low, red-roofed house with corrals and stables. You would see long lines of buck fence, a flock of sheep nearby, and cattle scattered about feeding. This is Cora Belle's home. On the long, low porch, you would see two old folks rocking. The man is small and has rheumatism in his legs and feet so badly that he can barely hobble. The old lady is large and fat and is also afflicted with rheumatism, but has it in her arms and shoulders. They are both cheerful and hopeful, and you would get a cordial welcome. When you saw Cora Belle, you would see a stout, square-built little figure with long, waxen braids, a pair of beautiful brown eyes, and the longest and whitest lashes you ever saw, a straight nose, a short upper lip, a broad, full forehead, the whole face, neither pretty nor ugly, plentifully sown with the brownest freckles. She is very truly the head of the family, doing all the housework and looking after the stock winter and summer entirely by herself. 3 years ago, she took things into her own hands, and since that time has managed altogether. Mrs. O'Shaughnessy, however, tells her what to do. The sheep, 40 in number, are the result of her individual efforts. Mrs. O'Shaughnessy told her there was more money in raising lambs than in raising chickens, so she quit the chickens as a business and went to some of the big sheep men and got permission to take the doggy lambs, which they are glad to give away. She had plenty of cows, so she milked cows and fed lambs all day, all last year. This year she had 40 head of nice sheep worth $4 each, and she doesn't have to feed them the year round as she would chickens, and the wolves are no worse to kill sheep than they are to kill chickens. When shearing time came, she went to a sheep man and told him she would help cook for his men 1 week if he would have her sheep sheared with his. She said her work was worth $3. That is what one man would get a day shearing, and she could easily shear her sheep in 1 day. That is how she got her sheep sheared. The man had her wool hauled to town with his, sold it for her, and it brought $60. She took her money to Mrs. O'Shaughnessy. She wanted some supplies ordered before she went home, because, as she gravely said, the rheumatiz would get all the money she had left when she got home. Meaning that her grandparents would spend what remained for medicine. The poor old grandparents read all the time of wonderful cures that different dopes accomplished, and they spend every nickel they can get their hands on for nostrums. They try everything they read of and have to buy it by the case. Horrid patent stuff. They have rolls of testimonials and believe every word, so they keep on trying and hoping. When there is any money, they each order whatever medicine they want to try. If Mrs. Edmondson doesn't seem to help her, Grandpa takes it, and she takes his. That is their idea of economy. They would spend hours telling you about their different remedies and would offer you spoonful after spoonful of vile-looking liquid, and be mildly grieved when you refused to take it. Grandma's hands are so bent and twisted that she can't sew, so dear old Grandpa tries to do it. Mrs. O'Shaughnessy told me that she helped out when she could. 3 years ago, she made them all a complete outfit, but the rheumatiz has been getting all the spare money since then, so there has been nothing to sew. A peddler sold them a piece of gingham, which they made up for Cora Belle. It was broad, pink, and white stripes, and they wanted some style to Corey's clothes, so they cut a gored skirt. But they had no pattern, and made the gores by folding a width of the goods biasly and cutting it that way. It was put together with no regard to matching the stripes, and a bias seam came in the center behind, but they put no stay in the seams, and the result was the most outrageous affair imaginable. Well, we had a large room almost empty, and Mr. Stewart liked the idea of a party. So Mrs. Louderer Mrs. O'Shaughnessy, and myself planned for the event. It was to be a sewing bee, a few good neighbors invited, and all to sew for Grandma. So Mrs. O'Shaughnessy went to Grandma's and got all the material she had to make up. I had saved some sugar bags and some flour bags. I knew Cora Belle needed underwear, so I made her some little petticoats of the larger bags and some drawers of the smaller. I had a small piece of white lawn that I had no use for, and of that I made a dear little sunbonnet with a narrow edging of lace around, and also made a gingham bonnet for her. 2 days before the time came Mrs. Louderer, laden with bundles, and Mrs. O'Shaughnessy already laden. We had all been thinking of Cora Belle. Mr. Stewart had sent by mail for her a pair of sandals for everyday wear and a nice pair of shoes, also some stockings. Mrs. Louderer brought cloth for 3 dresses of heavy Dutch calico and gingham for 3 aprons. She made them herself, and she sews so carefully. She had bought patterns, and the little dresses were stylishly made, as well made. Mrs. O'Shaughnessy brought a piece of crossbar with a tiny forget-me-not polka dot, and also had goods and embroidery for a suit of underwear. My own poor efforts were already completed when the rest came, so I was free to help them. Late in the afternoon of the 29th, a funny something showed up. Fancy a squeaking, rickety old wagon without a vestige of paint. The tires had come off and had been set at home. That is done by heating the tires red hot and having the rims of the wheels covered with several layers of burlap or other old rags well wet. Then the red-hot tire is put on, and water hurriedly poured on to shrink the iron and to keep the burlap from blazing. Well, whoever had set Cora Belle's tires had forgotten to cut away the surplus burlap, so all the ragtags were merrily waving in the breeze. Cora Belle's team would bring a smile to the soberest face alive. Sheba is a tall, lanky old mare. Once she was bay in color, but the years have added gray hair until now she is roan. Being so long-legged, she strides along at an amazing pace, which her mate, Balaam, a little donkey, finds it hard to keep up with. Balaam, like Sheba, is full of years. Once his glossy brown coat was the pride of some Mexican's heart, but time has added to his color also, and now he is blue. His eyes are sunken and dim, his ears no longer stand up in true donkey style, but droop dejectedly. He has to trot his best to keep up with Sheba's slowest stride. About every 3 miles he balks, but little Cora Belle doesn't call it balking. She says Balaam has stopped to rest, and they sit and wait till he is ready to trot along again. That is the kind of layout which drew up before our door that evening. Cora Belle was driving, and she wore her wonderful pink dress, which hung down in a peak behind, fully 6 inches longer than anywhere else. The poor child has had no shoes. The winter had tried the last pair to her utmost endurance, and the rheumatiz had long since got the last dollar. So she came with her chubby little sunburned legs bare. Her poor little scarred feet were clean, her toenails full of nicks almost into the quick, broken against rocks where she had been herding her sheep. In the back of the wagon, flat on the bottom, sat Grandma and Grandpa, such bundles of coats and blankets I can't describe. After a great deal of trouble, we got them unloaded and into the house. Then Mrs. Louderer entertained them, while Mrs. O'Shaughnessy and I prepared supper and got a bath ready for Cora Belle. We had a T-bone steak, mashed potatoes, hominy, hot biscuits and butter, and stewed prunes. Their long ride had made them hungry, and I know they enjoyed their meal. After supper, Cora Belle and I washed the dishes, while Mrs. O'Shaughnessy laid out the little clothes. Cora Belle's clothes were to be a surprise. The postmistress here also keeps a small store and has ribbon, and when she heard of our plans from Mr. Stewart, she sent up a couple pair of hair ribbons for Cora Belle. Soon Mrs. O'Shaughnessy called us, and Cora Belle and I went into the bedroom where she was. I wish you could have seen that child. Poor little neglected thing, she began to cry. She said, "They ain't for me. I know they ain't. Why, it ain't my birthday, it's Granny's." Nevertheless, she had her arms full of them and was clutching them so tightly with her work-worn little hands that we couldn't get them. She sobbed so deeply that Grandma heard her and became alarmed. She hobbled to the door and pounded with her poor, twisted hands, calling all the while, Cory Belle, what ails you?" She got so excited that I opened the door, but Cora Belle told her to go away. She said, "They ain't for you, Granny, and they ain't for me either." People here observe Decoration Day faithfully, and Cora Belle had brought half a wagon load of iris, which grows wild here. Next morning we were all up early, but Cora Belle's flowers had wilted, and she had to gather more, but we all hurried and helped. She said as she was going to see her mother, she wanted to wear her prettiest dress, so Gail and Mrs. O'Shaughnessy helped her to get ready. The cemetery is only about 2 miles away, so we were all down quite early. We were obliged to hurry because others were coming to help sew. Cora Belle went at once to the graves where her parents lie side by side and began talking to her mother just as though she saw her. "You didn't know me, did you, Mother, with my pretty new things? But I am your little girl, Mama. I am your little Cora Belle." After she had talked and had turned every way like a proud little bird, she went to work. And oh, how fast she worked. Both graves were first completely covered with pine boughs. It looked like sod, so closely were the little twigs laid. Next, she broke the stems off the iris and scattered the blossoms over, and the effect was very beautiful. Then she hurried home, and everybody got busy. The men took Grandpa off to another part of the ranch where they were fanning oats to plant and kept them all day. That was good for him, because then he could be with the men all day, and he so seldom has the chance to be with men. Several ladies came, and they all made themselves at home and worked like beavers, and we all had a fine time. Sedalia was present and almost caused a riot. She says she likes unusual words because they lend distinction to conversation. Well, they do. Sometimes. There was another lady present whose children are very gifted musically, but who have the bad name of taking what they want without asking. The mother can neither read nor write, and she is very sensitive about the bad name her children have. While we were all busy, someone made a remark about how smart these children were. Sedalia thought that a good time to get in a big word, so she said, "Yes, I have always said Lula was a progeny." Mrs. Hall didn't know what she meant and thought that she was casting reflections on her child's honesty, so with her face scarlet and her eyes blazing, she said, "Sedalia Lane, I won't allow you nor nobody else to say my child is a progeny. You can take that back or I will slap you peaked." Sedalia took it back in a hurry, so I guess little Lula Hall is not a progeny. Everyone left about 4 except Gail, Mrs. O'Shaughnessy, Mrs. Louderer, and the Edmondsons. They had farthest to go, so they stayed overnight again. We worked until 10 o'clock that night over Grandma's clothes, but everything was thoroughly finished. Every button was on, every thread end knotted and clipped, and some tired workers lay down to rest, as did a very happy child and a very thankful old lady. Everyone got away by 10 o'clock the next morning. The last I saw of little Cora Belle was when they had reached the top of a long slope and Balaam had stopped to rest. The breeze from the south was playfully fluttering the rags on the wheels. Presently I heard a long hee-haw, and I knew the Lam had rested and had started. I have been a very busy woman since I began this letter to you several days ago. A dear little child has joined the angels. I dressed him and helped to make his casket. There is no minister in this whole country, and I could not bear the little broken lily bud to be just carted away and buried. So I arranged the funeral and conducted the services. I know I am unworthy and in no way fitted for such a mission, but I did my poor best, and if no one else is comforted, I am. I know the message of God's love and care has been told once, anyway, to people who have learned to believe more strongly in hell than in heaven. Dear friend, I do hope that this new year will bring you and yours fuller joy than you have ever known. If I had all the good gifts in my hands, you should certainly be blessed. Your sincere friend, Elinore Pruitt Stewart. Okay, so this one, we got the story of Cora Belle, which is sad. Cora Belle's mother was supposed to be wed, but he died on his way to bringing back the marriage license. And she was obviously already pregnant, and her parents shunned her and sent her out of the house because she was unwed and pregnant. And so, I forgot the mom's name. Cora, it's Cora something. But Mama Cora, like had the child and knew that she was going to die during this childbirth and just really wanted her child to know that she was loved and wanted her child to be taken care of by her parents, the child's grandparents, and that in hopes that the child's grandparents will love her and be a happy replacement for the disgraced daughter that they obviously had. And so the grandparents do take Cora Belle, but they are both older and sicker. And so Cora Belle is basically just running the whole household. She's doing everything and she's doing a great job. She's getting a lot of money in from the sheep and everything, but all of the money is going to the grandparents and their different concoctions and different medicines to treat their rheumatism. And so she just goes without a lot of things, clothes, food, shoes, all of the like basic things that people shouldn't have to go without. And so it has been decided that, well, Mrs. O'Shaughnessy has decided that with this birthday coming up, they are going to have a sewing bee. And so they get together and they make a bunch of clothes for Cora Belle. And Cora Belle makes it for this occasion, and she is just so overwhelmed and so happy that these clothes couldn't possibly be for her. That's just too kind and too nice and all of these things. And so she is just so, so thankful. And yeah, and then we get this other little snippet. It looks like part of the letter was missing. Um, because we just immediately go into talking about Sedalia again. But we get a funny little anecdote with Sedalia, and there's this other mom who uh, doesn't read or write, and so her vocabulary is pretty small, and she has children that have a bad reputation of taking things without asking. And Sedalia is like, oh, like your child is such a progeny. I can just tell. And this woman gets offended, thinking that progeny is akin to like honesty. And it's like, don't you dare talk about my kid that way, or else I will slap you silly. And it's Eleanor notes in there is like, well, I guess the kid isn't a progeny. And I just, that like little bit of humor is so nice. It's so nice and welcoming. And I love all of the kindness and community that is built in this. And I feel like Eleanor, I mean, this is all coming from Eleanor, all of these deeds that she herself is doing. And we're not getting, the other half of the letters from her friend. And so, like, Eleanor could be the meanest person ever. I don't think this is the case, and I don't think she's disliked. But I could see how she's like, yeah, and then I helped these people. And I can see how it could be. I mean, it's hard to say, but like, could it have been read or could it have been perceived her actions as being like, this busybody is butting into business that has nothing to do with her, and she is just claiming to be this wonderful savior? Or she actually is just a great person and taking care of the house and her now husband and this baby who may or may not actually have a name. I don't know if the two are the same person or not. And like taking it upon herself and having so much empathy for people who are struggling and helping them so much. And I would like to think that she just loves humanity and sees the good in people even through hardship and just wants to do these things because she wants to do them rather than having like an ulterior motive or being too busy to help or whatever the case may be. And I like that. It's refreshing to hear. It's refreshing. But that's where we're going to end today. But thank you all for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.